This topic today is actually a topic I think is probably one of the more important topics you'll ever hear in your career. It talks about how you perceive yourself and how you perceive yourself based on others you may maybe know or associate. So a lot of attorneys that aren't, or even law students that aren't in top law firms or didn't go to top law schools will often compare themselves to others. And that will be very upsetting to them, or they'll be in social situations or situations based on things that they think they should be accomplishing in their careers and they're not. So it creates attorneys tend to have a lot of problems because of this, and people do as well. I've seen so many careers go off the just not work because of this, and people have a lot of problems, including people becoming suicidal, becoming alcoholics, and actually committing suicide based on how they perceive themselves compared to others. And this happens quite a bit in the legal community. So and it happens to a lot of people. So it's a very important topic. And I think once you hear what I have to say today, it will help you a great deal. So one of the things that I want to stress at the outset is that if you want to achieve a really good life and a thriving legal career, you have to push drama out of your mind and focus on what truly matters. And that means that when you're doing whatever job you're doing in a law firm or whatever practice setting you're in, you need to. I'm thinking of my camera. Sorry about this. You need to do. There we go. We're good to go. You need to. Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm really sorry about this today. I'm having some issues. Okay, so you need to be in a position where you're focusing on things that truly matters. A lot of times people will get distracted by news, unnecessary conflicts, or just various distractions that will really derail their progress and keep them from reaching their full potential. And these distractions, drama, and so forth, are really something that ends up impacting a great number of attorneys, probably like at least 50 or 60% of them. And it takes them away from being focused, and it creates a lot in their legal career. Oh, here we go. This is great. Okay, so we got that. It creates lots and lots of problems in their legal career, and these problems tend to derail their legal careers. And so, if you want to be successful in a law firm, you need to learn how to not be part of this. My head's just now; it's just crazy. But you need to learn how to not be part of drama and really focus on the meaningful task, eliminating this from your career. 1 second here. Okay, growing up, one of the smartest people I knew that I know now is not the brightest person in terms of his IQ. He's not someone that can engage in complex arguments or even understand them. He never was able to even pick up upon what was going on with a lot of socializing. He wasn't able to come up with business ideas. And when I met him, people around me also considered him not to be that intelligent, but just he wasn't able to get involved in drama and different things. But I can say, having watched the course of his career, that he's one of the smartest people I ever know. What would happen is people would walk up and say negative things to him about people or different things, and he just had no interest in it. Other students would be critical of other students, and they would be critical of teachers or parents, and he just had no interest in it. And he was in a really competitive environment because I went to a competitive boarding school, and a lot of kids there were coping with stress with smoking, drinking, and smoking pot and harder drugs like smoking crack cocaine, even in some occasions. And through all this, my friend never drank, he never smoked, he never used drugs. He got very average grades. He also was not wealthy, but he had a really ugly car that had that one of the headlights actually, it was this old Buick. The headlight hung down, came out of the holder, and so he was driving around with a headlight that was facing the ground. And he never had nice clothes. He was just very average. And so he was at my school. There were people that did really well. There was one kid I knew that got 1580 in his SATs instead of a 1600. The second time he actually took the SATs again and hit a dictionary in the bathroom so he could cheat. He got a perfect score. But he told the wrong people, and that actually got out. And the school let colleges know. So he literally didn't get into any of the top colleges. He got into the University of Michigan as an in-state student, but actually off the wait list. So after many years, my friend, that's very average, he lost both of his parents. Both of them were smokers. One of his sisters died of anorexia, and the other died of a drug overdose. And one of our mutual friends died of alcoholism. So people like, excuse me, people that he knew, that we knew, were not doing well. And my friend never got involved in any of this drama, never got distracted, and I never expected good things to happen to him. I just figured that not being smart and having just a very even keel towards his life would just not take him anywhere. Like he just didn't have major social skills. He didn't have the social skills, basically were just avoiding drama, and he wasn't smart, that smart, and I was wrong. By the time he was in his 30s, he had started what became a very successful company in Los Angeles that was making movies and television shows. Like he started this from scratch, just off of very simple, I don't know, relationships he made, and just really went places. He didn't do well in college, but he was interested in this industry and got involved and did very well. He's got a very good marriage. His children are happy, and he really has probably, I would say, a much better life than almost everyone that I know. He's just he's been very successful. And I think one of the reasons for that is because he's never comparing himself to others. He just has always done the very best he can. And by not comparing himself to others, he's just put his head down and just worked and not didn't get like people in Hollywood and actors and actresses. It's a very cliquey type of profession. And he just didn't get involved in any of that. He just did his work and did it without all of these distractions that send people off on these tangents that they don't do very well. One summer, I had a law firm for about 10 years, and there was a law firm that just helped my companies. And I hired a first year law student, and she was an incredible attorney. Like I'd never seen anything like it. Like she just was catching on to everything very quickly. The writing was good. She cut through to the meat of what was being taught, of the matter she was doing. And she did all this without even the bar exam or completing law school. And I was amazed because she was just very strong. She was ranked one of the top 5 students in her class after her first semester at Pepperdine Law School. And because she was just such a good interviewer and just, I don't know what she did, and diligent, and she became a summer associate at one of the top like 5 firms in the country, Sullivan and Cromwell. And then she applied to as a transfer student to all of these schools like Harvard and Stanford and got into them. And what made her unusual was not having gotten into these law schools. And she actually didn't go. It's crazy. What made her incredible was how she did her work, because in the office I worked in, it was my office, there was just so much drama. There were people fighting and people worried about elections and just taking sides and just all this stuff. And she just never participated in that. She just would get to work very hard, not get distracted, completed her assignments, not listen to people that were trying to get her involved in different things. Some of it was just people that were mad at me, but she never got involved. She would just sit there and work as people around her talked and gossiped and things. And she just would sit down and work and turn in these just absolutely flawless assignments. And then Sullivan and Cromwell, she had this summer offer, and I don't know why they canceled it, but for some reason, there's something going on and they canceled their summer program. And that's why she came to work for me. And I wasn't paying her very much money, like $25 an hour, which is nothing like the $1,000 a week she would have made at Sullivan and Cromwell. But she could have been upset and thought she was working for someone that wasn't at her level, that she was doing work that was beneath her. And she could have decided, because she wasn't getting paid a lot of money, she couldn't work as hard. And this is what a lot of people do. She could have been resentful that this is the only job that she could get in like Malibu, half a mile from Pepperdine Law School. Instead, she just did everything she possibly could to do the best she possibly could. And She didn't care that she wasn't making enough money. She didn't care that all this gossip was going on in the office. She didn't care that a lot of the work was beneath her. She didn't care that she was the top of her class and should have been in a big firm. None of that stuff bothered her. She was just focused on her work. This is a very important characteristic that the people need to have. And this is a characteristic that a lot of attorneys and lawsuits don't have. They worry about all of these things that have nothing to do with the work and doing a good job. And these sorts of people are the ones that advance wherever they go because they don't get involved in worrying about something other than their job. So if you've worked in law firms, all law firms are like this. I guess they get to more than like 10 attorneys or so, but there's always factions that are gossiping about different attorneys and resentful of different people, giving them work, resentful of the firm, gossiping, feeling angry about whatever was going on. They're not making enough money. They're not getting a responsibility. This is what law firms are like. And in large law firms, there's always groups of associates that will be against the firm, that will think, oh, I need to go look at for another job. This place isn't that great, even if the firm has been around like 100. And all these attorneys worry about stuff that has nothing to do with their job. They're not focused on work as much as they're focused on all of these other things that have nothing to do with it. And it even goes down to like just spending time on social media, like having your cell phone on all the time and texting people and all this stuff that people do that has nothing to do with the work. And the entire summer that this girl that was working for me, I don't think I ever saw her phone once. I don't think she ever was not looking at anything on her computer that didn't have anything to do with being an attorney. And she just was completely focused on her job. And this is what the best attorneys do everywhere. Like when they get jobs in law firms, they do this, people notice it, and they don't get involved in the drama, and they go places. And why am I telling you this? Look at my friend that just concentrated on the work that he did. And in this completely gossipy place, Hollywood, he was able to get ahead without the smarts and the conniving and things that other people did. If you're smart, that's good, but you have to concentrate on what's in front of you. And more you get involved in things that don't have anything to do and interested in things that are Democrats may not like Republicans in the firm and vice versa. And people will have interest in social justice and things when other people don't. And so people get involved in all these different things and it hurts them. And I'm going to tell you right now, like, I review 100 resumes. Out of every 100 resumes I review, and I review all the resumes that come into BCG Attorney Search each day, most people will put all these things on their resume that have nothing to do with practicing law. They will put other interest in social justice or pro bono or Democrat or Republican politics or groups that they have that could be polarizing, like groups they're members of, all these different things that have nothing to do with practicing law and show a complete lack of focus. And I'll give you one hint right now in your resume, like what you need to do. And this isn't a presentation about a resume, but the best resumes, like you can improve your resume by 5 times and get 5 times as many interviews if you're able to take your resume and just remove anything from it that has nothing to do with whatever type of attorney you want to be. If you want to be a corporate attorney, your resume should only talk about corporate law. It shouldn't talk about associations you were a member of that have nothing to do. It shouldn't talk about the best grade in your constitutional law class. It should only be focused on corporate law. And if you've done anything that has nothing to do with corporate law, you just say the job title. You put no description. People that do this get many more times interviews. I would say 5 times more interviews. So your resume just needs to show you're focused on one thing. It doesn't need to talk about anything but that. So I worked with an attorney. I worked with him as an attorney. And once he went to a top 10 law school, he got a really good job with a good firm after law school. And then he decided that he didn't like the hours. He didn't like how meticulous he had to be, like careful with his work. He just didn't like all these things about his job. He didn't like people. He didn't like the practice area he was in. He didn't even like the location of the city he lived in where the office was. And he said he didn't want the same life as the partners. He thought they were just had these horrible lives. And he left the firm, took a job working for the government because he thought it was going to lead to great things. And he did this like literally, I don't know, like 12 or 18 months into his first job. And he believed that if he moved to Washington, D.C. and worked for the government and this political action committee or whatever it was, that He wouldn't have to work as hard, he would be paid well, and also he thought it was much better to work in Washington, D.C. than the town where he was working. So he took this job about 6 months before presidential election. And then what he never could have imagined, his party lost. And so when his party lost, they didn't have the budget from donations and things for his job. So he was out of a job. And when you do something like that, by the way, when you drop out of a law firm and you go into another practice setting, I mean, you can overcome it over time, but no one was interested in him because he was a risk. People knew that if they hired him, he would leave again. If there was like some bright, shiny object in front of him that looked better than the law firm. And this is how people get distracted. This is how people's legal careers implode. If you're in a law firm, you need to stay in a law firm at least until you get 5 or 6 years of experience and know what you're doing. If you leave, people aren't going to hire you. Why would they? Because they can hire someone that has remained committed to working in a law firm. So you would do the same thing if you were a law firm. You would hire people from other law firms. So no one would hire him. He wasn't getting any interviews. He applied to a bunch of places on his own. Before he came to me, I helped him apply to a bunch of places, but he wasn't getting interviews. He was very angry with me. He thought I was doing something wrong. I explained to him why he wasn't getting interviews, because if you're not focused on what you're doing and you get distracted, why would they hire you? They can hire someone that didn't. So a law firm would have to be really dumb in most cases to hire someone like that. But he actually ended up getting lucky. He got a job in the Midwest. So he was working in Washington, D.C., and he got a job like in Cleveland, working as a staff attorney for a local firm in Cleveland, and like a well-known firm, but it's a Midwestern firm. And they paid him about half of what they were paying their associates. The firm, first of all, didn't pay top market salaries because in Cleveland it was a local firm in the Midwest, offices around the Midwest. And somehow he got into an interview there. I don't know what he did. I think he just found some job as a staff attorney online. He was able to convince them that he made a mistake getting into this lobbying position. He begged for the job. He told them that they wouldn't regret hiring him, and he would work hard and be a great hire. And he did this when he was just at the point of complete defeat and just he was a staff attorney. Now, keep in mind, this guy went to a top 10 law school. I think he went to a top 3 or 4 law schools. So he had a really good law school fund. And he also had done really well there because he dropped out and wasn't focused. This was the only job he could get. And if the law firm had talked to me, I could have told them what would happen the second he got there. So he called me after, I don't know, about 6 months. He told me that he was very mad that the firm wasn't paying him so much, that he had a right to a really good job because he went to such a good law firm. He talked about how the people there weren't smart. A lot of them went to law schools in Ohio and not top law schools. He felt that he wasn't getting good work because he wasn't. They made him a staff attorney because he would be at risk for leaving. He didn't like that law firm said to him that in order for us to consider you as a full-time associate, you have to be there at least a year. But the firm, most times when you become a staff attorney in your firm, you're never going to be an associate, because all you're doing is getting experience doing work that's not as sophisticated as the associates are doing. So they really don't have any incentive to do that. They'll hire people that are coming from backgrounds that are very good for associates, other firms where they're doing associate work. So then he went to the firm who was like, I don't like working in Ohio. This is crazy. And the firm might have had a small office of 8 people or something in Washington, D.C., just a small office, maybe in a couple other large cities, but nothing substantive. And he told me that he tried to get them on multiple occasions to send him to a nicer office, and no one did anything. They needed a staff attorney there. They didn't need a staff attorney in Washington, D.C. And so he begged all these people for a job, and he thought he was smarter than them. And one thing to understand is if you're working for a partner in a really good firm, that person has got 10, 20 years of experience, and they are smarter than you. They've managed to climb the ranks and get something that not everybody can get, and someone that has a job and a career. And it doesn't matter before they went to law school or their LSATs, he was very critical of the law schools and stuff people went to. And so he had all these things that he listed wrong with the job. He would call me from home during the workday. He would be at home where he wasn't supposed to be, and he would say, find out that I'm not here. He would talk down about them, and then within a few months, the law firm kind of caught on to all this, his resentment, and they fired him. So what he did and what he did wrong was he just became extremely concerned with money, his title, not liking his job, and ideally he should have been, if he was very grateful and worked really hard, he might have gotten from position to being from a staff attorney to an associate. And if he was interested in learning, he would have applied himself and done as well as he possibly could and tried to stand out and build more hours and all these things, but he didn't. So what happens to most successful attorneys, and I've seen this constantly, like I've seen it with partners and associates, is they turn out the background noise of their jobs. And actually, it's very interesting. I was talking to a partner that called me and that I had a call with yesterday, and he was a very successful partner with $3 million in business. He was in a not a huge market. He's in Arizona. He had been at the firm for 20 years, and then there was this political faction that developed in the law firm. And after having been someone that just put his head down and did really good work for 20 years, he decided to get involved in this political faction. And now they've asked him to be out of the firm by December 31st, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. The type of work he does is there's a lot of conflict. So he just made this mistake, like after 20 years of getting involved in politics in his law firm, when before, in the 20 plus years he's been there, he was just doing his work. And think about this summer associate that didn't get this job at Sullivan Crown and came to work for me. She was happy and just did the best work despite her plans falling through. And what happened with her is her next year after that summer, like I started calling her, like, because I know people at really good firms, and I was like, this woman's incredible. You have to talk to her. I was doing everything I could to help her just because she had that attitude. And so there's just multiple examples, but too many people worry about stuff that has nothing to do with their jobs. And the guy with the staff attorney job should have worked hard and proven himself and built up good titles so he didn't become an associate. And he didn't get good references. He didn't have good references from his first firm because he left, and he just never committed. And despite having gone to a great law school, he became more concerned about his salary compared to other students. He became more concerned about where he lived. He became more concerned about the quality of work. He became more concerned about where people went to law school, all in his firm, all these sorts of things. And had he not done that, he would probably have a much better career in life than he does now. Because after all this, he just had nothing. He had no ability to pay his student loans. He had no income coming in. And he should have. That's not right. And he was in a very bad situation because he was concentrating on bright, shiny objects, which is another job. He wasn't committing. He wasn't putting his head down. And he ended up dropping out of the legal career, from what I remember. In law firms all over the country, you may be like this. You may be at a firm that you think is beneath you, or the practice area is beneath you. You may be at a firm that's really good, and you feel like that firm, there's something wrong with it. But you may be critical of the firm you're at because you're not paid enough, because you're overworked. You may feel critical of the firm because of the assignments you're getting. You may be critical of the firm because other things people are saying about the firm, negative things that have happened that often don't concern you, that you inject yourself into. And so you'll find all these reasons to be unhappy. And because of that, your mind is always somewhere else and you're not going to succeed. And you could provide these kind of people that are negative, which is a high proportion of attorneys, anything, and they would still do the same thing. And so what happens, and that doesn't just happen in law firms, it happens in all employers, in any place that you may have worked. I'm sure you've seen it. It happens if you are working in a restaurant. It happens all over. But what happens is every employer is constantly weeding people out. They're weeding people out that don't support them, that aren't on their side, that don't belong there, and weaken the entire firm. So they can't have people like that there. So if you're negative and you're worrying about other things, you're someone that they will get rid of. It always happens. If you're not, they will like you because Your job as an associate in a firm, for example, or a partner without work is to be a soldier. Like soldiers don't go and question what the assignments they're doing or how they don't question anything. They just do the work. And if you ask them to go and fight with guns in front of people, they will. They're not going to find excuses or reasons not to do it. That's their job. So when I was in Aspen not too long ago, and I was sitting with my children behind a table with these people that were complete snobs from New York City, they were discussing like the pros and cons of wine and tequila. They knew so much, I couldn't believe it. They were just having this long conversation about these wine and tequila, and they knew the production cost of each. They had opinions about the taste, and they just had all this knowledge. And they looked at the menu and they said, or the wine list, and they said a $300 bottle of wine was trash because it was too earthy. A specific tequila wasn't smooth enough because for the cost. And they just had all of these reasons that they were critical of every single thing on the list, and they were comparing everything to something better. Meanwhile, my children were sipping lemonade and just very happy. And I puzzle things about all like that all the time because people are trying to discern things and get involved things and people never enjoying tequila, the wine. They're just finding reasons to be critical of it. And that's the type of attitude that it just isn't about what you drink. It's about everything you do. It's about who you associate with. It's about all these different things, where you work, how much money you make, all these things. And it doesn't take you anywhere. Attorneys in large cities, like a lot of them, they just want to drop out of the practice of law. And they do so from these big firms at an alarming rate compared to people in smaller firms. And I think, that a lot of the reason for that is that people that get there just become very critical. They just find all these reasons to be critical. And that's like the subtext of what it's like working in a lot of those firms. People are just critical. They find all these reasons to be unhappy, and they end up leaving their firms and not having a stable long-term career. And that doesn't happen a lot in the smaller markets for some reason. Like people join firms and they seem to stay there for a long time. And in the largest legal markets, people are just very competitive. They're aware of all these inadequacies and things that are wrong. There's all these different things. And they compare their clothes, their neighborhood, their schools, the schools their kids attend. I remember when I worked in New York, people would ask me questions about my tie brand and things and be very interested in that. And it's not, and people in large law firms compare where each other went to school or the prestige of their firm compared to other firms, the bonuses. And they just continually focus on these things that have absolutely nothing to do with doing good work. And people will cloud their mind with the social network group they're in, then their clients, what they're like, their spouse, all these things that they compare themselves on. And then people will worry about political parties and they'll worry about all these different things. And it doesn't, people worry about something someone said and use it against them, or that all these different things people worry about that distract them. And I'm just listing things that are going on in the US right now, but people are very angry about statues and they're worried about all these different things. And even to the extent that they might worry about in a law firm representing a company that's not politically correct. What I'm talking about here is when you work anywhere or when you're living your life, there's always going to be reasons to be unhappy. And most attorneys will find a lot of reasons like that. But there's plenty you can be angry about and consume your mind with. And if you start doing that, it's going to detract you from actually doing a really good job. Like my friend that wasn't that smart, honestly, probably doesn't even understand the difference between Fox News and CNN and what each of them stands for. He's just not interested in it. And it doesn't do anything for him. One night my ex-wife, this several years ago, was friends with this doctor, a very smart doctor. She'd gone to Princeton and was a varsity athlete there and was making a ton of money as a neonatal surgeon. And I wondered how she could concentrate on doing surgery on babies for 8 hours a day. And she was very angry when she got to the house. She decided to listen to, she was very left-wing Fox News on the Curiosity on her way for the drive. And she was just completely astonished that people would talk this way and said that the Fox News was a fascist organization and all these things. And and just very upset and just couldn't stop thinking about it, and just really clouded her mind with that. And then you have like rural markets, places where people live, where they may drive horses, they drive pickup trucks, ride horses, and send their kids on a bus to local school. A lot of times when you talk to attorneys in those markets, and I talk to them all the time, they're just very settled. They're not worried about politics. They're not worried about all these things that people in large markets consume themselves with. They could care less branded tequila and stuff. And then the further more rural the attorney is, the happier they are. And probably the better work that they do. The lesson that I believe is that as an attorney, you need to keep like your mind focused, and you can't worry about anything else. You have to just be focused on the work. Like this girl that was a summer associate. I'm going to say a few offensive things right now, but I'm just telling you things that relate to my experience and how this type of psychology infects people and hurts them. I know a powerful older man in Malibu, and he has a much younger wife, and she is very beautiful. She was on all these magazine model and all these different things, but he was like in his 60s when he married her, and she was in her 20s. But he had a lot of experience, like marrying women and having problems, getting divorced, and so he decided like the one thing that he believed in, and this is a thing that a lot of very powerful men believe in, and this is a very successful men. Like this particular guy was worth probably $300 million. And I know another guy that was worth $200 million, and he did the same thing. But this guy would, before he would let this woman associate have friends, like he needed to meet them and approve of them. And because in his experience, and I've had this experience, and so many men have had this experience, and I have one of my good friends is actually living in my guest house right now because he's having this experience. What happens is nice areas or in different areas is a lot of times wives will start associating with other women that are unhappy and talking negatively about their husbands and want to or just unhappy with their lives, even though they may be living very well. And so he didn't want his wife to associate with those kind of people. He didn't want his wife to associate with, and this woman that he married was also from a small town in North Carolina. And so he didn't want her associating with people who were too materialistic, they would gossip, they were unhappy, and focused on what other people were doing. He believed that if this happened, his marriage would be over. And he also told me, like the same thing that I've seen, that all these marriages, you may be in this situation, I don't know, but he said all these marriages would die when the wives would start being influenced by the wrong people. They would just go from really liking the husbands and thinking they were great to the opposite. And when he married her, she thought absolutely the world of him. She couldn't believe like how lucky she was. She liked everything about his personality. She thought they were a really, and so they ended up getting married. And a lot of men with wives from all over the country, they very successful men, they end up in Malibu. There's another guy from on my street that is from Nebraska. He owns like this large fertilizer company with this younger wife. There's another man from rural Virginia that made all this money in stocks. He lives there. And a lot of these people, the woman, thought they would be happy if they married someone that was very successful. They came out of these environments where they just didn't know what that was. These women often grew up poor. And so this man knew that when these women would start associating with other women they met in Malibu, they would start seeing the world in a new light. They would start feeling badly about their clothes. They would start feeling badly about how generous their husbands were because other husbands were more generous for their wives. So they felt they were too selfish. And they would sometimes they would meet these friends who had husbands that were even wealthier. And then they would think, oh, my husband's not as successful as the other. Like how nice they thought they were, or that they didn't have enough friends and they were in the wrong social circles, or they weren't taking the same type of vacations. And that, that the husbands didn't buy them nice cars, or they spent too much time working, or all these things. And so they would start comparing themselves to this. And now keep in mind, I'm talking about people that came out of like rural areas of the country where none of this stuff, you can't even imagine it. But once you're introduced to people like this, everything changed. And so they would say the husbands didn't respect them. And then a lot of times the husbands would make them sign prenuptial agreements. And then their friends would all try to get their husbands to rip up the prenuptial agreements, but that was going to help everything. So they would be mad that other husbands didn't do that. And then the women that didn't have prenuptial agreements would realize how much power they wanted and then would start threatening divorce if things didn't happen the way they wanted to. And then they would consult divorce lawyers behind their husband's back. And I'm not trying to take sides in this issue, but I'm telling you what this man told me and what another very successful man told me, because it's all about people getting into these atmospheres or these groups where there's all these people that they feel that they need to be like, and so they need to rise to that level in terms of their dress and everything and all their social things. And then they get there and they suddenly become very critical of someone that loves them and has provided a good life, but they're in that situation because of the people they're suddenly associating with. When they were living in these small markets or small places and they met their husbands, they felt very positively about them, but all of a sudden they were around people that were having a negative influence on them and seeing problems and all those sorts of things. So what I'm trying to point out to you, it's very significant because it happens my friend's getting divorced now, and he's living in my guest house. He's blaming his wife's friends. He was like, we were very happy. We were living in Australia. We were living in a place that wasn't this. And then she got here and we had kids and she made all these friends. And now they're all getting divorced. A lot of times when one woman in the social group gets divorced, they're talking to their friends about how awful their husband is. And then everyone picks up on that and they start doing the same thing and their lives just aren't good. They end up a lot of times getting divorced, and then that's a whole set of situations. Another funny story, and I'm just trying to illustrate this for you, is very important. There was my old neighborhood. There's a funny story that is still going on today. A woman that I know that she was very gorgeous when she was younger. She grew up poor in a small town, and she would talk about how when she was young she was given free school lunches and that she got all her clothing from thrift store, and that's where she never got new clothes. And then she somehow married a man from Los Angeles who, after several years of struggling, started this clothing company that became a major brand. It was called Seventh for All Mankind or something. It was a very big brand, and he would cheat on her, like, and she knew about it, and he treated her like a second fiddle, and she didn't like that. But then he sold his company, and the second it sold, and it sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, she divorced him, and she got all this money. I think it was like $100 million that she got when she was in her 40s. And you would think at this point she would be very happy, but she was divorced and didn't know what to do. So she became best friends with this very super high-end decorator that was from a wealthy background, and then did decorations for all these very influential and rich people. And so this decorator introduced her to the most expensive taste possible. Just, you can't believe, like, bringing in artists from Italy to paint walls and things. And so this woman bought a few really nice homes. She spent too much on them. She didn't get a good deal. And then she would remodel them and redid them at just like an incredible expense, like much more than the house would ever be worth. And she did the same thing with her office. I had an office in Malibu, and she rented an office right next to me, and it spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, like small office. It was only like 15 or 1700 square feet, and just did all this very expensive work. And this kind of spending this kind of money on something was crazy. And not only that, but she did all this office space when she only had a 5-year lease, and the office was only worth 5,000. She struck a deal to pay 10,000. She didn't care. And so within a few years, she moved out of the office because there was nothing for her to do. She just had this nice office, but didn't have any work to do. So I actually knew her. So I asked her to rent it. And so I rented it from her, and everybody like went in there. It was just like uncomfortable because it was just so over the top. It wasn't like, it was just ridiculous and made people uncomfortable. And it was the sort of office where you felt like you needed to whisper. And I rented out. It had all the furniture in it. And I learned later that This dining table that cost her over 200, conference table that cost her over $250,000. It was from French Castle. She bought a house for $7 million and then put like over $20 million into it, doing all these expensive electronics and bringing more craftsmen from Italy, doing these cabinets that were probably $1 million+, all these fixtures, all this crazy stuff. And I went into the bathroom. I was over there visiting her once, and I've been in the bathroom, and I walked in there, and the lights like slowly dimmed up, but not like a. And then a separate light came on over the toilet and illuminated it, and just it was just a crazy. I've never seen anything like it. And then I walked over to a sink. And the water turned on. It was just the right temperature, and then there was like towels were like in the towel warmer. And I walked out, and I told her I've never seen a bathroom like this. And she's told me, well, the electronic systems in this house have been in magazines and won awards. I don't even know how that would happen with a house. And none of this would have been a problem if this house was in a neighborhood of $25 million homes. I guess that would be like an average house there. But the houses in this neighborhood didn't cost anything more than $10 million. So all the investment she made was not something that people were likely to buy, because people that want to buy a $30 million house or $25 million house aren't going to move into an area with $10 million houses. So it was just a really dumb investment. And then she bought another house for $10 million, and she spent another $10 million fixing it up and redoing the inside. And then she put it on the market, and it sat there for like over 2 years, and just no one was interested in it. And eventually she sold it for $12 million because she's starting to get into the neighborhood of like needing money. And remodeling this home and fixing it up, just this $10 million home. And then the other home took several years of her life, like all of her time, just doing nothing but this, trying to make something look the best it could possibly be. Then she went and started a restaurant in Venice and decorated again, like this incredible expense. She hired mixologists to make these unique cocktails. She brought in like the best chefs she could possibly do. She let her decorators spend over $1 million on this restaurant and had a very expensive lease. And within a few years, the restaurant failed. And then she was prolific with buying things. She bought a $3 million home for her decorator to stay in, because her decorator, I don't think, was from Los Angeles, while she was working for her. And then she got to the point where she realized that she'd invested all this money and she was in trouble, and kicked the decorator out of the house. And this particular story may not be something that you think is relevant to your career, but all of these things impacted her. Like, she was surrounded by people where she thought she needed to spend all this money, and she thought this was her perception of the world. And instead of being happy with all this money, she ended up spending it all just trying to prove that she had the nicest house and the best things. And her perception from someone that had grew up in a small town and everything, and her parents were poor, changed. And so she's very unhappy. And then she ended up losing most of that money. And so she was just trying to do something to look very important to other people. When I was in, this is a sad story, but I lived in a fraternity house for 3 years during college. And then in the class that graduated before me, there were like 7 guys. So there was 5 or 6 guys in each class, and then you have 3 classes living there. And there were 7 guys in the class before me. 2 of them committed suicide within a decade of leaving the school. One of the suicides that made me the most unhappy was there was a guy that was very happy. I met him when I toured the college as a prospective student. And then later, when I attended the college, I joined the same fraternity he was in. And he was just a really nice guy. He dressed like he was from Oklahoma, like he had an accent. He was big and like happy. And he'd been from a small town at home where there were like 25 kids in his graduating class. And then he was like the valedictorian and very, very upwardly mobile. And so he came to the University of Chicago, got a scholarship, and he had all these great dreams about what he could do. The problem was when he got there, he just couldn't compete like academically, didn't understand like all these kids that had gone to like Exeter and Andover, whatever the hell that meant. And by his sophomore year of college at the University of Chicago, he said that all his friends from high school were already married and starting families. So they hadn't gone to college. And he could not get good grades. Like he would go into class and he couldn't keep up with things and just these core courses that everyone has to take. And he had been like an athlete in high school and just very straight. And then he started drinking a lot because he didn't know what to do because he felt like he wasn't fitting in. He felt like he was being rejected. He'd never been told that he had wasn't a good student, and so he started getting all these bad grades. And he started his self-esteem started like really going down, and he started drinking almost every night of the week and using all these drugs. And his grades were so bad that when he was a junior, the school asked him to leave. And I couldn't believe like the contrast before what he was like when before he got there and then what he became. And so he left, and so his self-esteem had been crushed. He just felt like very badly about himself, and started self-medicating with whatever he could. The people that he'd been friends with in his fraternity by their senior year were getting into top medical schools and law schools, and he just kept drinking and feeling badly about himself, and then he ended up putting a shotgun in his mouth and blowing his head off. And I don't think that honestly that any of that would have happened to him if he hadn't gone to that school. He hadn't had been in an environment that just crushed his self-esteem, that he was comparing himself to others and didn't feel good about himself. And instead of applying himself when he ran into trouble, like his first semester, and just working and studying all the time, he just took a different route. What happened influenced his perception of himself and the value he believed in himself. He didn't think he was a good student. He didn't think he had a right to be happy anymore. He didn't feel like the winner that he'd been before. And because of all of this people that were around him, instead of thinking, okay, I'm doing the best I can, I'm going to improve. I'm lucky to be in this environment. I'm going to give it all I got. I'm not going to get hung up on how well other people are doing. I'm just going to do my thing. He probably would have graduated, and you don't have to get the best grade in college to be successful. He probably could have been very successful. And some of the most successful people are the worst students. But he just bought into all this and ended up from a very happy, outgoing person that like said hi to everyone and just really happy to someone that whose life died. So it's sad. His high school classmates were happy. Like they didn't care they went to college. They got married and went to work and wherever, factories, I don't know, starting families, and they survived. But they didn't compare themselves the way he did to people in the super competitive environment. How you perceive the world around you and how you buy into it is going to determine what happens to your life. Why do I say this? I say it because what happens is a lot of attorneys and law students feel badly about themselves. They feel badly about themselves because they're not getting the right jobs. They feel badly about themselves because they didn't get the right grades. They feel badly about themselves because they've gotten fired from the job. They feel badly about themselves because the whole world just seems to be giving them negative feedback. They buy into it all, and they feel like they're in firms where there's no future. They feel like very unhappy. They don't feel like they belong, and they just feel defeated, and they compare themselves to other people. I can call any attorney and even partners, and I can say, hey, it might be like any firm, but other than an AmLaw, like 100 law firm, I can call them and say, hey, I've got this job at the AmLaw 100 law firm. And everybody's going to be like, yes, and partners are like that, associates are like that. No, partners may have conflicts and things, but everybody wants to be part of this elite group of attorneys. And they feel like if they're not, there's something wrong with them. And they just buy into it. And they're in an environment where if you live in New York, you're feeling inferior to attorneys at bigger firms and all this stuff. And it makes you unhappy. And so many attorneys are unhappy because instead of just doing their job and doing the best they can, they're just comparing themselves to all these other people that they believe are more successful than them. And that makes you unhappy. And I had another fraternity brother where the same thing happened to him. He killed himself. And he came from a background that changed his perception of the world and made him feel like he didn't belong. So he was from Cuba, or his parents were. He grew up poor and also got into this school. And the same thing happened to him. Like he didn't get the grades he wanted, and he just kept getting grades that were bad. So he started drinking and using drugs, and then just a year or two out of college with all these people that he knew, like just having these like great things happen to them. He just was couldn't whatever. He was just felt like he was unsuccessful, and then he also killed himself. It's just before that he was just using drugs and alcohol at the time, which messes with your mind and makes you more depressed. But that's what happened. So, anybody that reaches their potential, and I want you to reach your potential in your career, the most important thing you can do, and what the best attorneys do, what the happiest people do, is they put their head down and they don't worry about other people. They if they fail, that's okay. They keep trying. Everybody has problems, like in their career. Everybody has setbacks. Most attorneys get fired at least once or twice, but you need to learn from it, and then you don't have to worry about the world around you in a way that's going to make you unhappy. You need to concentrate on what you're doing and just become as good as you can and do all the things you need to do. It's working hard, it's learning, it's making sure your work's good, like trying to get work from the best people, all these sorts of things. You concentrate on what's in front of you and doing the best job, and don't worry about people around you, and don't worry about what other people are. Don't be like these wives that are suddenly unhappy and divorced from suddenly being happy because of the people around them. Don't be like this attorney that became a staff attorney and then just dropped out because he was comparing himself to others and his classmates from his top 5 law school. And you just don't want to be like that. You want to not perceive the world in a way that's going to hurt you. There's no advantage to that. Now, it's okay to be ambitious, but being ambitious doesn't mean you're constantly comparing yourself to others, because if you adopt that mindset, you're never going to be happy. And so many people drop out of the practice of law. I see it all the time because they refuse to settle for nothing but the very best. I had a woman that I was working with. I really liked her. She was a nice person. And she had left her job at a firm called Schulte Roth, and she was a employee benefits attorney. It was a great practice area. She left it to go in-house. And then the company she had joined went out of business. And by the way, if you're thinking about going in-house, like that happens a lot. Like companies go out of business or just things happen. And so in-house jobs are pretty risky. But when she left that firm, she was making a lot of money, like $300,000 or $400,000 a year. And same thing, like she'd grown up poor. She did really well in an in-state college, like a University of Florida or something. Not even, that's a really good school. But anyway, some in-state college wasn't that great. She did really well, and she got into Columbia Law School. And then when I was working with her, trying to find her a new job, like she would only consider the top 10 firms in the country to work in. And she didn't have the ability to do that because she'd gone in-house and wasn't an attractive candidate. But I got her like several interviews, like with firms that were good, but they were smaller. And she refused to go on these interviews because she thought these firms weren't equal or as prestigious as Schulte Roth. And she thought that if she did that, her people that she knew from working there and law school and stuff would see her like in a negative way. And she didn't want that. She thought she needed to be part of this elite group of attorneys or nothing. If it wasn't the best firm, she wasn't going to work there. So I got an interview at a really good firm. I think it was Sherman and Sterling. And they interviewed her twice and then 3 times, which is rare. But meanwhile, she ran out of money. So she no longer had an apartment, and she packed up all her stuff and had all of her stuff over at a friend's apartment, was sleeping on her friend's couch, and she was waiting for the Sherman and Sterling offer to come. She was just very hopeful, but they just kept delaying everything. And after several weeks, she was still waiting for this offer. She didn't want to wait any longer. So she went and moved in hundreds of miles away to live with her parents. And she decided that she was giving up because she wasn't getting the kind of reception she wanted from her previous law firm. So she was going to quit the practice of law. Incredibly, she went back to school and she moved to San Francisco, and she took this class in computer, like how to write code for computers. And it was like a boot camp of like 20 weeks or something, but she took this and she thought that would look really cool. Like she was in San Francisco, like she was doing this coding. She was going to become like some sort of tech entrepreneur. And so she thought that if she became a tech entrepreneur and did this coding stuff, just like these really successful people, like Elon Musk and all these people that started off coding, that she would look really cool to her friends. And then several weeks later, they were moving very slow. Sherman and Sterling called and they said they wanted to interview her again for the job. And the reason they hadn't hired her yet was because they weren't sure that they had the work. And so at that point, she had already decided that she was going to become a programmer and hopefully a tech billionaire. And she wanted to see herself as an attorney. She tried to get into this really good firm, but now she only saw herself as employed with the best firms. And so she became a computer programmer instead of what she was capable of, and never went on the interview with Sherman Sterling, where she would probably have gotten the job. When I was a young lawyer, there were all these discussion boards that came out, and the greedy associates, they were called greedy associates, for all over the country would be comparing notes, and they would spend all this time all day on these sites. And I noticed when I was an associate that all these people were just spending all this time and talking about what was happening at other firms and how other firms were better. And then they would gossip about their firm. And then everyone just used these boards to criticize their employers or to compare themselves to others and making them feel inadequate, angry, and more. I remember I was working with a guy that was a partner at a major law firm, and he was in charge of office. And a lot of law firms, I should tell you this, a lot of law firms will actually, they'll just record URLs that you went to. And if they really want to spy on you, they'll actually record your screen. I've seen that happen before. I had a group of attorneys. I was going to move to another firm. It was going to be like a really big deal. I would have made $500,000 or something. And so the firm kind of caught on that they were going to be leaving, so they started recording their screens and then convinced them to stay, but based on what they saw. But these gossip boards will make people feel inadequate. But this partner that I was just talking about recently, he said that people on the staff would look at lists of the sites that people visited and spent time on, so they have reports. And he said that anybody that was like gossiping on Above the Law or top law schools or these greedy associates boards were the kind of people that never advanced. They were always the kind of people that left. And so the firms would actually judge them based on the fact that they were spending time in that, and would realize that these are probably problem people. There's all these sites like this that gossip and shape how everyone perceives the world. There'll be things about how one law firm is more prestigious. They'll talk about partners being racist or cheater and whatever. And their lives become very focused on that. And they start going in this direction where things are negative. So years ago, I was on this plane. I was flying from New York to Los Angeles, and I happened to be sitting next to this woman that was older than me and also lived in Malibu. And she started asking me all these questions, like sizing me up, like where I lived, what I did for a living. And she said something that to me was nice, but I took it the wrong way. And she said, "You seem very successful. You should be proud of yourself." And I said to her, "Thank you, but I don't feel successful." And she said, "Why is that?" And I said, "These people that I know, they have private jets, they have all these books, they have they associate in these, they're friends with celebrities, and all these sorts of things that I don't have. And I feel like if I did have that, I would feel like I was successful." And then she paused, and up until that point, I had a really nice conversation with her. And she said, "You have many issues. I'm not even going to get into it. You have deep issues." And then she just ignored me the rest of the flight. I thought that was very interesting. And she was right. When I was in law school, there was a huge snowstorm. I went to University of Virginia, and there was a huge snowstorm in Washington, D.C. and Virginia. It was massive, like this. And Washington, D.C. was like basically shut down. But I drove 90 minutes or 1 hour to my interview because someone canceled it. And I got to this firm, Dickinson Wright, and there was only one person in the entire office. Like everybody had taken a snow day. And this is before people worked remotely and everything. And so I got there, and this partner used to interview you, just wanted to, get involved with litigation and work on all these things. And I was excited about maybe going to trial and how I really wanted to be a team player and all this stuff. And he was listening to this, and then he paused and he was like, you've never worked in a law firm, because it's the exact opposite of that. It's just hornet's nest of like gossip and negativity and things. And then I said something to him that's actually one of the reasons that I'm giving this presentation. I said something to him like, wherever I go, I don't really worry about that stuff. I just do my work, and I don't really want to be a part of that. And he was so impressed. Then he thought I was his friend. He spent a lot of time when we went out to lunch, and then his firm didn't have the money or whatever to hire summer associates. So then he started trying to get me interviews at all these different offices. just because of what I said. And I thought that was very interesting because, and then I didn't end up going to that firm, but he was like, this is incredible. Like someone that's not interested in all these issues and wants to do the work. This is very rare. And it is. When this woman said that, I remember that what she said was true. Like I was just comparing myself to these other people, and because of that, not feeling successful. My second wife was a very nice person. But when I met her, she was living with her parents. She'd worked in a law firm, and then it didn't work out. And she was in this very niche practice area with jobs. And at the time when I met her, she was living in this 1,400 apartment. I was at like the peak of my career. I had this multi-million dollar house, a beach house, a company. My company had like over 800 employees. It was just like huge. It was crazy. I had a big office just in Pasadena with 50 or 60 people. And I had different people were in different buildings because there wasn't enough space. And so when I met her, I was very liked her and I wanted to help her. So I helped her family financially with some things. Like I helped them just a lot of things. And because I cared about her and I wanted to care about her family. And I ended up hiring her brother to work for me. He was a nice guy, actually very smart, but he had been, hadn't lasted at a bunch of different jobs that he had. And I even hired her sister. So the family like really liked me. They thought that I was a very nice person. I was helping them. And then I even paid for my own wedding. That was really nice. But when I met her, she was just extremely happy. She was just really excited about everything. She was just excited about this life. She couldn't believe her luck, not just because of this financial stuff, because we really loved each other. It was a very good relationship. And the first time I took her on an international vacation, she was like so excited that she like stayed up all night and was doing like P90X all night because she just couldn't sleep. She was just so excited about going on this international trip. She was just couldn't believe her life. And at this point in the relationship, like everything I did, she just thought I was like the greatest person in the world. And it made me feel good about myself. It made me become even more successful. And she would tell me daily like how grateful she was for what I'd done for her family. And that made me feel good. And I loved contributing and helping her because she was my fiance and wife. And then after years of getting married, we moved from Pasadena, California to Malibu. And Pasadena is like this area that it's a very old area of Los Angeles. It's all the houses are like old, and some of them we were living in like probably a 50, 60-year-old house. It's people aren't like it's not fine like people in the entertainment industry or rock stars or CEOs with like hundreds of millions of dollars there. It's just a kind of a quiet area. It's like the Midwest. And I always liked that. I was very comfortable there. But when we got to Malibu, she started making friends with the wives of like well-known professional athletes. One of her best friends was a celebrity, like this big celebrity. And then she started meeting all these people where their husbands were worth hundreds of millions of dollars and just all these sorts of people. So pretty soon, it didn't take very long, but the people she associated with weren't like me because I don't have private planes. I'm not famous. I'm not a household name. Attorneys know him, and I'm certainly not that. I wasn't involved in social games. I'm more of an introvert, so I wasn't playing those games. But she was surrounded by all these people, and these friends were not all of them, but a lot of them were interested in rumors and speculation. And then pretty soon she started, instead of being all excited about things like taking our national trip or going out to a nice restaurant in Beverly Hills and stuff, she started seeing me in a negative light. I wasn't social enough for her. And then she started not seeming as happy and then started like doing things like going to therapy and then wanting me to go to therapy. And spent all her time, like some of her friends started getting divorced. So she started talking to them all the time. And then even blocked her phone because she didn't want me to see these messages from her friends talking about having affairs and everything that were just like all this stuff. And that she was suddenly surrounded by like just a lot of people that weren't happy or weren't happy with whatever was going on. And first she left me out of it, but at some point I became like a topic of all this stuff. And she started going out like with her friends 3 or 4 times a week, all these parties and things with people, making you competitive about what parties people were invited to. If we weren't invited to a party, it was like a bad thing, even though I didn't care. All these sorts of things started occupying her mind. And then she was mad at me for not trying harder to make friends with all these husbands. And I was nothing like these husbands. I mean, it wasn't, and these people, I didn't want to really get involved. And And then it was the same thing. Like these women, some whose weddings I went to were just so excited when they got married, but then they started having these affairs. And then instead of locking their phones, and they started using Snapchat, everyone, to share secrets so they would be deleted. And then one time, one of my wife's best friends had this meltdown at her son's birthday party because a girl that she wanted to impress socially had only stayed at the party like 30 minutes. I mean, this is the kind of stuff people are concerned about. And all these friends that weren't working, they became, instead of whatever, they started putting all their energy into being concerned about social situations, what other people were doing, and comparing themselves to others. And they too started to seem, me at least, unhappy. I'm not going to get started on this whole thing and talk about it, but there was just so much drama and issues that it wasn't good. The husband of one of my wife's best friends, I had this law firm, and I did all this work for him, and I did it very cheaply. I helped him file a couple of lawsuits against his business partner, and then I negotiated for with him. I got him $500,000. I only charged him 14,000 for it, just my hours. I could have charged 40%, but I didn't. And then I did it again with another lawsuit. This particular guy, after I helped him, it was incredible. Like I did all this stuff for him, I changed his life with all this money, and then after I did all this, he called up and he had this company, this small company, and talked an attorney that worked for me, that had worked on these matters with me, to come work for him, and paid her three times what I was paying with her. Literally, this is what this guy did, and and stole one of my employees after I helped him. It's just completely crazy. People like that I was meeting had no morals, and then this particular guy ended up getting divorced like very quickly. It was just absolutely traumatic because he was having an affair with his wife's best friend. You can't even imagine this kind of stuff. So his whole life, because of this bad stuff, like just imploded. He moved to Mammoth, California, which is like this ski place, like 5 hours from LA, and just his life fell apart, which happens to a lot of bad people. And I'd helped him. He put a down payment on the home with money. I got him, and then stole an attorney for this. And then when I confronted him about all this, he said that I should be paying the people who work for me more money, or this wouldn't happen. And then I was mad at him. And one of his companies was starting these marijuana dispensaries. And he told me that if I made any trouble for him, that he knew a lot of dangerous people, and that if I didn't go away, he'd have someone teach me a lesson. It was crazy. He was threatening me. So a few days later, my cars were vandalized in my driveway, like pretty seriously. And I'm assuming it was him. I don't know. We had someone do it. A couple then came over, and I told them that I was selling my house. This is just how these people behave here. And I ended up telling him who was buying the house. He called them up, and the real estate agent on the other side, and said that he had a very similar house, but it was much nicer, and my house was overpriced. And he told them that they should come see his instead of trying to buy mine. And so they canceled the escrow, and then so I didn't sell my house, and then he got in a fight with the real estate agent about the fee. After this, I stopped being friends with this guy, and then there was an attorney I worked with that I'd helped, and she had a heart attack in court and almost died. She sued a previous employer, and sued a previous employer for not giving him a check, the uncomfortable chair, and a lot of stuff. So I sold a house. These are some other people in Malibu. I sold a house more than a year ago, but to one of my wife's friends in Malibu that I'd known for years. And it was a rental. It was a rental beach house, and I had it on VRBO. It had a bunch of furniture in it when I sold it. And when I sold it to them, they asked for the furniture and appliances and towels and all this stuff. And I agreed to do so, but only after a few rentals that had been scheduled prior to the sale. After those, I didn't want to have nothing from there, but I said I would come back up everything after. And then when I contacted them to pick this stuff up, they stated that I'd abandon the items, and they never agreed in writing to give it back, so they didn't have to. And I ended up suing them to get my money back because it was a lot of furniture, and that wasn't good. And then another Malibu couple who has a parent that is a multi-billionaire had a son who sexually abused a boy for a few years, was much younger than him. It was a real scandal. And the younger boy lived in a trailer park, and the trailer parks here in Malibu are pretty nice. Now they're over like $1 million, but so it's not a bad place to live. But when the abused child's family brought this to their attention, they paid the other family several $100,000 to leave Malibu, just to so no one would talk about it. They would just to leave. And then they started creating a separate rumor that the father who moved away was a sexual abuser and all these things. And but then their son did the same thing. He started sexually abusing other children at his private school and got kicked out. And then the couple offered the school like a lot of money, like a huge donation to keep the child in the school. And several parents of the school all banded together and said, "We're going to take our kids out if you leave them here." And that's what happened. And just a lot of bad people, like bad morals. Another friend of my wife, people I know, Malibu, had gone to prison from stealing from people, just doing all these awful things. So I was just surrounded by all these people that had no morals. And I see people like this all the time, and I get angry. There's a lot of reason to be upset, but all this drama you can imagine isn't good. So I think that people should find peace, and I think that you should focus in on what you can control, because when you're in any environment, you can't control the environment, and you don't want to define yourself based on the environment. And the only way to survive and be happy is to do the best work you can in law firms. I think to extract yourself from drama in your life and to have the best career possible. And the only way you can do that is to stop worrying about inconsequential stuff. And this is what, if you want to be like rise in the legal profession, like you want to go from where you are now to something much greater, you want to improve, what you need to do is focus on your work and not get involved in this. Because the second you do, bad things are going to happen. It always does. These people always lose jobs. They never succeed. But you need to focus on everything to the not getting involved in all of this stuff. And there's so many opportunities around you to be miserable, to see things in a way that distracts you from the task. And then the truth is, if you do your job well and you don't get distracted by this stuff, you're going to succeed. And you honestly, you don't need to be at the best firm in the world. You don't need to worry about being in the most prestigious job. You don't need to worry about all this. All you need to do is do the best work you possibly can and focus. And if you do that, you're going to rise to the top of your firm. And when you rise to the top of your firm, you're going to be more self-confident, and you're going to be in a much better place to get another job and to keep improving the type of firm you're at. And that's a lot of what I do is I coach people and over several years. So someone might come to me as a first year associate, and I will talk to them about what they need to do to move in 6 months and how they need to position themselves. And then they'll move to another firm and they'll do really well there and they'll focus on the job. And then they'll be in a position to move another one. And so you can start out at a small firm and move to a big one if you really focus on what you're doing and not what other people are doing, and just committing to your job and not getting distracted. And most people, they perceive the world in a way that just makes them judge themselves and based on what other people are doing, and they're happy. So you need to extract yourself. You're going to always have problems. You're never going to be able to keep a job, and you're never going to be happy in your career. There's just a lot of things that people do to stop all this chatter. Some people will do yoga, or they'll do religion, or meditate, or other people will do the wrong thing, like drugs and sex and things. And my mother was like an alcoholic and was an Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think a lot of people that become alcoholics, it makes them even more unhappy. I don't know what it is about that substance, but it really messes with people. And when they start abusing it, and there's only certain types of people that are predisposed to abuse it. But before she got in that, she was always very unhappy. She had grown up in a small town, father owned a hardware store. And then she ended up marrying my dad. He's like from a famous American family. He like went to Harvard. His family, I guess my family too, is like there's all these famous people like Laura Ingalls Wilder, Amelia Earhart, Laura Ingalls. There's a big senator he's one of two people from Kansas that has a staff in the Capitol. He's a famous writer, great prep schools. And she, when she saw how my father viewed the world, she always felt like an outsider. She didn't go to school. He made her feel inferior. So they ended up getting divorced. But then she moved to a really nice neighborhood where it was the same thing. She was living in a very small house. That's where I was living, in this really nice suburb, but it was like probably the cheapest house in the suburb. And she just didn't fit in with all these people. And so then she felt excluded, started drinking more and more, and felt excluded by dad, felt excluded by people in the neighborhood that were wealthy and had this great, perceived these great lives. And so she suddenly was just focused on all this negativity. And it was only until she got in Alcoholics Anonymous and started thinking there's all these things that they do in AA, but one of the most important things that they do is they have a serenity prayer where they talk about accepting things you cannot change, having the courage to do things that you can, and then the wisdom to know the difference. And there's other things where, you realize you can't control alcohol or you have a problem and you can't control it. And the only way to control it is to ask for help from something greater outside yourself. So you have to like basically surrender and just say, I can't control all this stuff. I need to focus on something outside myself. If you worry that you're not measuring up, these are things you can't change. And you can't stop drinking when you worry, all about the world around you and feel inadequate. And you can't be happy until you stop worrying about things you stop worrying about things you cannot change. And this is your perception of the world will change. So one of the things that actually made me really happy is I stopped watching the news and reading it. And I noticed I used to log into news like several times a day and just watch all this news commentary on television for a couple hours at night. And then there was a famous commentator that went to the University of Virginia Law School. And so I knew someone in the alumni development, and I texted him like saying I really want to talk to her, and because I thought she was pretty awesome, and I wanted to ask her some questions and about this kind of drama she was talking about. And despite me having known this guy for over 20 years and having spent a lot of time with him, he did the right thing and didn't even respond. I texted him, and my text had all these statements about the news commentator's political positions, how cool it was. And he used to come out and visit me, spend time with me, and dinner and stuff. He had a recent college graduate who was working for the law school just contact me and come to me basically asking for money, but they don't do it directly. And I was offended by it. The whole point of this webinar is that everywhere you go, there's drama. It detracts you from what is essential. When I was practicing law, people would stop by my office every day and share all this stuff. If you're practicing a law firm, or no matter where you are, I'm sure you're exposed to it. Everybody is, and everybody used to be interested in drama. I used to have a news network on my television in my office, and it was on a big screen television. And it was you can tell you CNN or Fox was on one of those, and everybody was always talking about the stuff they saw. And there's just, if you read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, that's all about drama. And then law firms will contact me and will say they don't like something I wrote and it's offensive because it's too liberal or conservative. So they'll say that something I said they didn't like, and that's more drama. So and I get emails from attorneys that are very upset with me because I don't represent them, or something I wrote or whatever. And there's just a lot of drama. And then I even had, this is a true story. I had this like stalker that I couldn't help for this job search, and I'd never met or spoke to him. And so he was looking for me. On our website of our company, we had several offices listed and addresses and things. And he didn't like something that I wrote, or he was rejected, and he set up a blog, like a hate blog about me. It was very strange. He would just write articles every couple of days and post them there, which of course I didn't like. There wasn't really much I could do. And this guy was just off the deep end, and he actually ended up just in this bizarre thing where he went into someone's house he didn't even know and shot them, and then ran away. And then while he was running, the police were chasing him, and he shot himself and killed himself. And that guy was obviously obsessed with drama. But the only way to improve and have a good legal career is to really focus on how hard you work and try to be happy and not worry about others. You don't need to compare yourself to others. You just need to do the work that's in front of you. Badly about yourself, you want to remain happy, not involve yourself in this. And you don't want to be like any of these people I talked to today, or like the guy in Oklahoma, or the guy who dropped out of the practice of law because of staff attorney, or the girl that left the practice of law because she was too concerned how she would look to her peers because she wasn't getting a job in one of these super prestigious firms, or the person who drinks himself to death because they believe they're not the person they should be. I didn't tell the story, but my best friend in high school, he was not a great student, but his father was like on the board of Michigan State University, which is a decent school in Michigan, and you have University of Michigan State. Those are the two big state schools. So he was applied there. His father was on the board, so he had a lot of pull. And so my friend applied there, and he didn't get in. He was just so devastated by not getting in. And so he went and he was able to somehow get into some school in Colorado. and then he flunked out. Then he tried to go to local school in Detroit, like Wayne State, and take all these classes, and that didn't work out. And his father had this very successful construction business. He tried to work for them, and that didn't work out. So it was like the same thing. This is crazy. Like this is a while ago, but he was in his 30s and drank himself to death and died. And I think because a lot of it was because he felt like he didn't measure up to his family. He felt he didn't measure up to the kids at this private school I went to that went on to great college and stuff. He just felt like badly about himself. So he just punished himself for the rest of his life. Literally died from drinking. I guess that can happen. So you don't want to worry about others. You don't want to get involved in drama. You don't want to feel badly about yourself based on things that have already happened. And you can only control what's in front of you. You just don't want to get involved in this stuff because it's going to hurt you. And again, this is a depressing webinar, but my point is that getting involved in this stuff will destroy you. It will destroy your health. It will destroy your marriage. It will destroy your career. It's a very big deal. And I commend you for watching this because most people never take the time to learn this. And this particular thing is something that ends like prematurely, like so many legal careers and even lives. Just don't participate in this, don't get involved, be focused, and that's how you're happy. And the story I told at the beginning of this webinar was just about this guy I knew that really wasn't very intelligent, and he just but never got involved in this kind of stuff. And he went to an okay college, did okay there, but when he came out, he like moved to LA. He decided he was going to get involved in the entertainment industry, and he just put his head down and did the work the best he could, and ended up doing very well. He's famous, and he's made a lot of well-known movies, and he's got series he sold to Netflix, and he's written episodes of shows, and wow, who would have thought? But it's all, I think, just because even though he wasn't that smart, he concentrated on the work in front of him, and no one does that. Like almost everyone. Hollywood, of course, is a place where there's just lots and lots of gossip and drama, but a lot of people aren't like putting their heads down and just doing things. And that's what this guy did. And just completely amazing to me because I just never would have thought. This is also what successful attorneys do. Like the girl I told you about that worked for me in the summer, like just didn't care like about prestige law where she was working and everything. So I hope this has helped. So what I'll do right now is we'll take questions. I'm just going to take a break for like 1 or 2 minutes. And then this is a live webinar. So whatever questions you have about your career or different things, like anything that you're concerned about or want to ask about, or different situations you may find yourself in, ways to improve your career, what sort of career moves should you make, what to do if you don't have great grades, what to do to find a firm where you're upper mobile, what practice areas to select, all these questions I'm happy to answer for you. Resume questions, interviewing questions, whatever you have. So I will be back in like just a moment. And then when we come back, we'll do questions and ask as many questions as you have, because this is very helpful to everyone. And I love answering questions. People sometimes don't ask a lot of questions, but the people that do pretty much always ask great questions. So I'll be back in a second. Thanks. All right, questions. Give me 1 second. Share this. Oops, wrong screen. Give me 1 second. Actually, yeah, I want to tell you about something that's interesting that I've been working on and that I'm getting ready to launch for people that are like really excited about their legal careers and really want. And if you watch this much, it's obvious to me that you take your career very seriously. But I'm launching 1 second, I got to save something. But this is cool, what I'm going to tell you about right now. So I'm pretty excited about it. And I think it could be very helpful for you. I haven't launched it yet, but I will be in the next few days. And it's a class that I'm having and you will, as someone that's attended these webinars, you will learn about it first, hopefully. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Oh, it's not easy. Okay, here we go. So this is the right screen. I'm launching a class that talks about how people can get into large law firms or bigger law firms, no matter what your current background is. Like I've taken so many people from smaller law firms into major law firms over the course of their career. And there's just so much stuff that you can do to put yourself there. And the class is a big class. It's a lot of content, but it'll teach you how to really get into better firms from wherever you are. It will teach you how to do your resume in a way that 98% of attorneys aren't doing into firms you normally wouldn't. It will teach you all the ways you can fix your interviewing and how to do much better in interviewing. I know how to, people I've coached, I can get almost every interview they go into, get jobs for. It teaches you about your practice here, your resume, networking, and just a lot of things. And I've placed people at pretty much every Am Law 100 law firm there is. And so there's all these modules that are part of it. So I will send you information about it shortly when it's live, but that's cool. And then I also have another thing that I'm offering, which I'm also very excited about if you like this kind of information. And it's the Legal Powerhouse Club, which is also a lot of information, a ton of information that could help you tremendously. So it teaches you, it's pretty much every 500 hours of video instruction that I've done before on all these different topics, how to get into big law, how to write your resume, how to, once you get into firms, being able to do really well there, which a lot of people don't understand. So this is huge. It's over 500 hours of instruction. It's broken down in a way that's very easy to work. So you don't have to spend 500 hours on it, but you can spend a few hours in each section. And then I also have all of my books and things that I've written. There's just a ton of them that are also part of this. So there's that. And then another cool thing that I'm doing in this club is recruiters get these job openings from these services. So they're from big firms or medium-sized firms, and they're exclusive to those attorneys, to recruiters. And so recruiters will get these email blasts every day with these jobs, and they have to pay for them. They're from these services. It's $1,500 a month for them. So I'm literally going to put those into this membership site. So anybody that wants can have access to these exclusive jobs, which I don't think anyone has ever done. And so it's things you'll find that you won't find anywhere else. So there's a lot of value to it. I wanted to just show it to you real briefly because I think it's something that could sending information about shortly, but it's good because if you're interested in this kind of stuff, there's just a lot more depth that you can go into and do much better. And with information, you can really improve your career. And a lot of the things like this, when you watch these webinars, these are today's topic is extremely important, but it's not, it doesn't give you out. It wasn't about your resume. It wasn't about interviewing. It wasn't about how to do well when you're in a firm. Today's actually was about how to do well in your firm, but it's just a lot of information. And then your mindset, the mindset you need to be in to do really well in law firms, how you need the self-confidence you need, how to develop self-confidence, how to develop goals, all these resume mistakes. I look at 100 resumes and literally 98% of them are making all these mistakes. We'll show you how to fix them so your resume sticks out. I'll show you how to find jobs to apply to, all these different secrets. So I'm excited about it. I will send it out to you to look at shortly, but I think that that's something that could help you quite a bit if you're really interested in this kind of stuff. Certainly not for everyone, but it's an incredible resource. Okay, so someone says, what if you don't have anything? How do you explain the gaps? So a lot of people have problems with their resume, have problems with their experience. They have all these problems that make them look unemployable. It's very common. And sometimes it happens when you go to law school, you don't get a job, or your job lasts 3 months, you get fired or whatever. And then your next job is 6 months, and it maybe something that's not a law firm. So people that have resumes and issues that look insurmountable, they're actually never insurmountable. It just means that you need to start somewhere. So there are always firms and people that will hire you. You don't have to just, the problem is that most people, when they're doing a job search, are only looking at jobs on Indeed or Law Crossing or LinkedIn. Just looking at those jobs, you're putting yourself into competition with every single person that has an internet connection. So why would you put yourself, if you have all these gaps and things and problems in your resume, why would you put yourself in competition with those? Why would you think that you're going to get hired? Because they're going to hire someone that doesn't have that. Now, so what does that mean? So it means you shouldn't, this is a very powerful piece of advice. No one should be just trying to get jobs off job boards, especially if you think your experience isn't good, because they're going to hire someone with better experience. If you're unemployed, they're going to try to hire someone that's employed. If you've done 3 different practice areas, they're going to try to hire someone that has expertise in one practice area. So all these things that will disqualify you from jobs make it problematical when you're trying to just let me just fix this, when you're just looking at jobs. So I just want to show everyone something here real quickly. And it's find my, I think I might have to, oh, here we go. I'll show everyone something real quickly like that is just almost guaranteed to get you a job. And what that is, like, anytime you're looking for a position, like going into LinkedIn and Indeed and stuff, or Law Crossing, wherever you look for jobs, is okay. It's okay. Law Crossing is good because they're jobs from law firm websites often that aren't advertised, and they'll stand a better chance because there's fewer applications. But all this stuff is okay. But really, what you need to do, let's say, just hypothetically, you're in Sacramento, California. So you're in Sacramento, California, and you want to do, I'm just going to pick a random practice area, you want to do litigation. So if you search for litigation law firms in Sacramento, you're going to get all these lists and rankings, right? So you have all these lists and rankings, and you have all these firms and all these things that say these are the best firms in that area, all these different rankings and things. So you're going to have all this information, which is helpful. Like, you can use this, but typically when you're looking at firms that are on these rankings, they're typically the best firms, so they're hard to get into. So you need to be very smart. So I'm talking about what to do if you don't have a job or you've never had a job. Like, it's a very simple strategy that no one follows. I don't know why, but it works. It works 100% of the time. So you have here, when you look at these Google results, you have all of these firms that do litigation, like all of these places. And some of them are small, some of them are large, but there's all these places, and no one is applying to them. They're not recruiting. No one's trying to find the candidates. They may have openings, these are places, and here we go, right here, litigation associate. This job is probably not advertised anywhere. So you find this job and you apply to it, but not just this firm. This looks like it might be a decent sized firm. You can find just all of these firms, like all these people that do this kind of work. This woman looks like she's a DUI defense attorney, but you would look for firms that do litigation that no one's applying to. And then you go and you just apply to them. And when you apply to them, it's not really that difficult. Let's see here, these people. They're not all litigation firms. You're going to have to go through them a little bit. But when you go to these firm websites, you look at the website of the firm. That's called Parker Taylor Law Group, and you look at who the attorneys are, and it's Parker and Taylor. So if you wanted to work there, you would just send Parker an email saying, "Hey, I would be interested in talking to you about a new attorney or whatever kind of attorney you are. I'm interested in talking to you about potentially coming to work for you. I'm looking for a position." And that's it. And people get jobs this way. They get them all the time. It's very easy. And these are places that aren't getting applications. So if you want to get a job and you're worried about your background, all you have to do is go and find firms that no one is applying to and apply to them. And you see here there's 324 places that are just listed here in Google. But if you even go further, then you start looking at other pages of Google. So you can keep going, and you're just going to find, if you get to page 6, there's going to be firms that do it. Like, if you go to page 10, there's going to be firms that do it. So you just have to continue, go through and find as many places you can apply to. And Sacramento, by the way, is not a big market. And the reason I'm using this market is because if you can do that, there's hundreds of places you can apply. Whereas if you were to go online and look at jobs on LinkedIn or whatever, you're going to find very few jobs. So that's a strategy that everyone should be following when you're looking for a job, regardless of your background, and it will work for you. Let's see. I found the discussion on avoiding drama in legal settings quite enlightening. However, I'm curious how we can apply these principles in a more competitive, high-stakes environment where every case seems to carry immense pressure. How can I remain focused on maintaining a positive work environment without letting compensation or internal politics affect my happiness appropriate? All you do is focus on your work. It doesn't matter how high stress the environment is. You just focus on your work. And instead of other things that are going on, if people are saying negative things or whatever, you just don't get involved. And there's always going to be internal politics wherever you go. But that's a strategy that I would recommend. It's not a very difficult strategy. You just need to try to do whatever you can not to get involved in other things and do your work. Your conversations with people should be related to the work. If people are stressed out or whatever about the work, still, your conversations are related to the work. You need to remain calm and just focus on the work and let other people take their life force and worry about these other issues. It's not something you need to worry about. As a junior associate, I'm often expected to take on challenging assignments without much support. And sometimes this leads to conflicts with senior attorneys when I ask for guidance. Okay, I'm worried this could create a reputation for being difficult or needy. How can I effectively navigate the situation to get the help I need while maintaining a positive professional image? How do I ensure the dynamic doesn't lead to unnecessary attention or drama in the workplace? Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember when I was a summer associate once, this partner gave me an assignment, and this is literally as a summer associate, and I came in and asked him a question, and he said, "I don't have time for this bullshit," and then stormed out of the office and took a walk in Central Park. He was so mad just because I asked him a question. I understand exactly where you're at, and then I started applying to get a little bit of guidance about what was going on, and it's just very difficult to do that. So what I did, and what I think is the smartest thing to do, is you can ask other associates like that, maybe at your level or a little bit above you, or ask senior associates for a little guidance. That's usually the best way of doing things. If you feel like you're not getting guidance, and it's very common. Some people get assignments and you won't know what you're supposed to do. And so young attorneys have to learn on the job, and partners often write off their time for the first several years you're an associate, but for the first 1 or 2 years, because you're learning everything as you go along. But you have to be very careful about asking partners for guidance when you're a young attorney. You can, but they often are annoyed by it, and it can be difficult. So what I recommend doing is, if you can, just using as many resources to research something as you possibly can. At this point in time, you can actually ask ChatGPT questions. You should have the ChatGPT 4.0, but you can ask them questions often, and it will give you guidance on kind of what you're trying to do. Because you might be getting these assignments about stock certificates or something, you have no freaking idea about what's going on. If it's litigation, then you need to refer to books that tell you the exact steps to follow with issues. And yeah, but that's a good question. And my answer is you try to talk to senior associates or other associates at your level or mid-level associates to try to get answers. Sometimes people that are of counsel are also good to ask. That's how counsel is a job where they're not partners and they're good attorneys and paid to be there, and you can ask them. But that's what I would worry about, how I would do it. People are not going to not like you because you try to do a good job and ask a question, but partners will be annoyed. When someone gives you work, they want to think they'll get it done. That's all they care about. And oftentimes they won't give you very good guidance. One thing you can also do when you're getting assignments is when a partner's just like talking to you and giving you some assignment, you can do what's called reflective listening. And that's what I learned to do. So you're saying I should do this. And they'll say yes. And then you say, okay, and you just make sure that you ask some questions while they're giving you an assignment. And then those questions, you get as many answers as you can. Now, if it's cryptic and through an email or something, then you often need to get help from other people. That's how I'd recommend it. It's a great question. There's a lot of gossip and drama in my firm, but I often feel drawn into it because I don't want to appear disengaged. How to remove myself from these situations gracefully, especially from when the drama comes from people in leadership positions. Yeah. So drama is actually, this is a very good question, because this partner literally that I talked to yesterday, there was all these issues with his drama. Like, he'd been in a firm for 20 years. There was this political stuff going on, and he was on the wrong side of it and got fired. I remember once I interviewed with this law firm. I was very early into my legal career. I was like 2 or 3 months in, and my friend convinced me to interview with this firm because he said they were all into entertainment law and driving around in convertibles and things. I thought it sounded really exciting. And I went and interviewed there. But I interviewed with the head of the firm, and he wasn't very nice to me at all. Like, he just wasn't really rude. And so I interviewed maybe with one more person, and then I walked out of the interview. I was just like, I don't want to work here. But I talked to my friend like 6 months later, and he said, wow, this guy's no longer working here because he got on the wrong side of a political situation. So this is just what happens. Like, partners do it, associates do it, but you just need to be very careful, because there's no benefit to being on one side of a political situation, because half the people are going to be on another side, or 30% of the people are going to get other side. So why would you want to alienate yourself from half the other people? It just doesn't make any sense. If you avoid it, it's not going to make you appear disengaged. You're just going to sit there and work and get things done. I had this experience when I was in college, like living in this fraternity house, like everyone was like drinking and fighting with each other, and there was all this political things going on. And then it was pretty funny actually. So in my junior year, even though I was the kind of person that went to the library all the time, I wasn't like going out with my fraternity brothers like every night of the week or anything like they did. And I just was working and wasn't distracted by all this insanity going on there. But in my senior year, they asked me to run for president, and no one else ran for president. And the reason was is because everybody had other people that hated them, so they didn't want them to be president. And there was just too much infighting. So that's just ridiculous. So the point is, I guess, is if you're on the rights, if you don't get involved in all this political stuff, you can you can rise. You'll be like the only person that's not, and people won't have anything against you. So you'll be just in much better shape than the people that are. Let's see here. This topic is also covered in the book Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. But Mark Manson does not profile any lawyers, to my recollection. Is it risky to appear too indifferent to status, hierarchy, and prestige, such you won't be taken seriously within the firm? Okay. In other words, should you always appear somewhat conscious of various metrics of social or professional standing? That's interesting. It's actually a good question. What happens I remember when I was working this from Quinn Emanuel, John Quinn, who obviously made a lot of money, would drive like a Toyota Camry. And a lot of the best attorneys do not give off that. They don't, and at least in large law firms, they're not trying to look flashy. They're not demanding that their clients fly them first class and things. They're actually de-emphasizing all that because they don't want to do anything to offend other people. This is what, based on status or whatever, they don't talk about country clubs or things with their clients. They just basically are there to be a servant, and that's it. They don't try to look very fancy. I remember, God, I forget his name. Anyway, there's very famous personal injury attorney I forget his name, in Los Angeles, like the most successful. And he ended up actually, his firm imploded because he was stealing money from them. But he was a very famous personal injury attorney. And someone sued me, but his friend was this personal injury attorney. And this personal injury attorney was worth at that time probably tens of millions, if not more, money, and had this big personal injury firm, this beautiful building in Los Angeles that he owned, and all these people working there. Anyway, so he sued me, and so I went to court, and this guy was like as low key as you possibly could imagine. And I just remember that's really what a lot of best attorneys do. Like they're not flashy. They don't talk about status, hierarchy, prestige. They don't get brought into that. They get there by their work, but even when they get there, like the most successful partners aren't like giving that off to or communicating that to their clients and so forth or other people. Like because anytime you try to be flashy or things, it upsets people and they don't like it. And if you talk about status, that upsets people and they don't like it. Or you talk about all these things, they don't like it. I remember like some of these resumes I see sometimes, I don't see them very often, but people will put down things like that they're interested in follow, or the big one is people go to one of these. There's about 10 of the best prep schools in the country. And so people go to one of these, like St. Paul's or whatever, they'll always list it on their resume as if people are going to be really impressed by the fact that they went to this great school that costs $60,000 or $70,000 a year. And because of that, hire them. And it's the exact opposite. Like people don't like that. Like attorneys, and this is actually very important to understand. So attorneys work for clients. And so you are like a servant to the client. Like your job is to work for the client. And when you work for the client, you don't want to look like you're fancier than them. The clients are almost always fancier and more prestige than the attorneys. They have these big businesses that are enabling them to afford paying someone $1,500 an hour. Or if they're not, they work in businesses where they have roles like that are hiring them, like the general counsel. And the general counsels usually don't make as much money as the attorneys that they're hiring. So the whole idea is that you don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like that. And the best attorneys aren't like that. Ones that are the most successful and working in the biggest firms and the biggest clients, it's the exact opposite. Now they may have really nice houses and things, but at the same time, or apartments, or and take really fancy vacations and have a lot of money in the bank. But for the most part, they're just not flashy, and because they don't want to piss people off. And they also, the best partners in law firms are able to stay out of, and I talk about partners a lot because I work with a lot of partners, but they're able to stay out of politics. And the second they do, the second they get involved in politics, like they just basically are done. They're going to be out at some point because they've pissed a whole group of people off. And that's just not good. You just don't want to do that. I remember when I was a summer associate at a New York firm that there was this one guy there that dressed even better than the partners, and he had like very expensive watches and all this stuff. And he got in a job there because his father was a client. But that guy got just kicked out so fast he didn't get an offer or anything. But yeah, you never want to look better than your clients. You never want to look like you're more status conscious or higher prestige than the firm you're at. The other big one, which applies to a lot of people, is they will feel really special about themselves because of the law school they went to, which is just ridiculous. All that shows that you got good grades in college and maybe do well in your LSATs. That's it. Why would you think you're better than people because you did that? It's all about the quality of work you do, and that's really what it's about, and your commitment. So you just don't want to get hung up on this. And I see so many attorneys that like think they're just like so awesome because they went to law school, and that's it. That's all they were talking about. They think that that's what defines them, but it doesn't. You should never be focused on that stuff. Thanks, by the way, for all these questions. They're very about office politics and how I'm perceived by others, which sometimes makes me anxious about my job security and advancement. How can I shift my focus from worrying about others' opinions to concentrating on my own growth and happiness? Are there exercises or routines I can practice daily to stay centered and focused on my work? What role does mindset play in a legal career, and how can I work on improving it? I really appreciate these questions. Looks like it's the last one. No one else has any questions. We'll be done. But so, yeah, being concerned about how you're perceived by others, your job security and advancement, and concentrating on your own growth and happiness. And then, are there exercises or routines I can practice daily to stay centered and focused on my work? What role does mindset play in long-term success in a legal career? That's a great question. And I appreciate you asking this because this is something that I've actually been, let me just fix something here. I've been thinking about a great deal recently, and I would like to, and oops, sorry about that. I don't know what just happened here. I'm sorry my head's so big too. It's just this strange thing I got going on in my, but in this, let me just see where I'm teaching this. In this course that will tell you about shortly, I have a whole like section, and I think, and it actually comes, it's the very first section of the course. It talks about mastering your mindset. And I believe that the mindset that you have is actually the most important thing for succeeding in law firms. It's how you think about things, it's how you think about yourself, it's how you set goals, it's how you think about your work. All these sorts of things, your mindset, are really what enable you to succeed. And most people don't ever develop that mindset. For whatever reason, they don't. People that work on their mindset achieve incredible things. If you look at people like Tony Robbins or even Mark Benioff, like all these people that will tell you that their success has come from developing the right mindset. It's just all about that. It's not about your mindset will make you successful. Your goals will make you successful. The way you think about your career will make you successful. All these things are something that people don't do and never learn. So in this course, I teach it, and there's a lot of videos about it. I also have a copy of Think and Grow Rich in it, which is a really good book, and lots of 20 hours of like instruction on. So and it's a really good question because mindset is, in my opinion, like just definitely like one of the absolute 100% most important things that you need to develop in your career. Because if you don't have the right mindset, then you're gonna fail. And the stuff I told you about today is the same sort of things that have made people fail. People fail because they don't think about their lives and their work in the right way. So this perception of how you're perceived by others and job security and advancement, you're in a law firm and your job is to be a soldier. So again, like a soldier just puts their head down and does whatever they can to do the best job possible and doesn't worry about anyone around them. So there's this great book, and I'm going to share it. I'm going to share this with you too, because I love this question. Give me 1 second. Point it up. Okay, so this is a book or an article that I wrote on my personal blog. And if you like all this stuff about improvement or self-improvement and your mindset. I literally spent like 2 years, because I think this stuff is so important, or 3 years, like working on this blog that contains hundreds of articles. I wrote one every day for 3 years about your mindset. And so in this pamphlet, it's called The Message to Garcia in Your Career. What happened is early on, I believe the essay was first published in 1899, and then it was republished in both World War I and World War II. It was given to every soldier it looks like in the Marines and the Navy. And then it's considered like one of the most important documents ever issued in the United States. You probably don't know about it, but it's very powerful. And let me see if I can even make my screen a little bigger. It's very powerful advice. And if you just search for a Message to Garcia in Your Career, Harrison Barnes, you'll find it. But it talks about that there's a fellow by the name, someone needs to have someone give this message to Garcia, who's in this mountain in Cuba. No one knows where he's at, and they needed to find him. And they said what to do, and they had this guy Garcia, or this guy Rowan, that could deliver it. And then he took this and he landed at night off the coast and disappeared in the jungle. And in 3 weeks came out having done it, delivered the letter. Now, this is what's so powerful about this. So he says, McKinley gave the letter to be delivered by Garcia, the letter to be delivered to Garcia. Rowan took the letter, did not ask, where is it at? And all these kind of questions. He didn't ask that. And he said that very few people ask all these different questions and just get involved in all this different stuff instead of just getting the work done. And I wasn't prepared to talk about this today, but the example would be, go to some regular people and say, look in the encyclopedia, make a brief memorandum to me concerning the life of Correggio, and then it says, people look at you and say, who was he? What encyclopedia? Where is encyclopedia? Was I hired for that? Is that really my job? Don't you mean Bismarck? What's the matter with having someone else do it? Isn't he dead? Is there a hurry? Shouldn't I bring the book and let you look it up yourself? And this is what a lot of people do. They just don't do the job. They just find all these reasons to not do things. So this is a really strong thing. I mean, it was literally given to soldiers in World War I and World II. But he says, McKinley gave Rowan a letter to be delivered to Garcia. Rowan took the letter, did not ask, where's it at? And just didn't ask any questions. He just got it done. And so I talk about all this. You have to read the article. I'm not prepared to talk about it today, but it's just very interesting. It talks about like people just concentrating on one thing and getting it done, and then not getting involved in what others are necessarily doing or other people's opinions. I think it's definitely worth looking up that article and read it. I think it'll help you. And yeah, so let me make sure I got all the questions answered. 1 second. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you everyone for being here today. And I hope this has been helpful. I think that this advice I commend you for listening to it. It's extremely important. It's something that literally destroys the careers of probably half the attorneys that get involved, and even partners. And so it's just something that if you learn to avoid it, then you're going to do far better in your career than if you start doing all this stuff and worrying about it. So thanks again. And I will also send out something about this course in the near future to you.